Donald Trump's goons at ICE just did it again. They physically attacked, accosted, and arrested a prominent Democratic politician, this time in New York City. They attacked and arrested the New York City comptroller named Brad Lander. Brad Lander's wife just posted the following message. "Hi, this is Meg Barnett, Brad's wife. While escorting a defendant out of immigration court at 26 Federal Plaza, Brad was taken by masked agents."
Do you have a judicial warrant? Do you have a judicial warrant? Can I see the judicial warrant? Can I see the warrant? I will let go when you show me the judicial warrant.
Brad Lander, a New York City leader, was just peacefully assisting immigrants in court when, boom, ICE agents pounced. Caught on camera, this wild standoff includes him refusing to back down, multiple angry agents, and a wife who calls it not the rule of law. Want to see power abused in an almost comical way? This is it. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Imagine walking into a courtroom to stand by your neighbors, offering guidance to those caught up in an immigration system that feels like it was designed by someone who permanently had their laptop on caps lock. That's Brad Lander's day, a normal Tuesday no less, until it wasn't. Lander, the New York City comptroller, found himself face to face with a group of ICE agents who looked like they'd just been tipped off that this middle-aged city leader was secretly the villain of the next Fast and Furious sequel.
Brad Lander had frequently been at that courthouse to offer help to immigrants, to observe the proceedings, to make sure due process was being followed. The immigration courts are dismissing the cases of the immigrants who are showing up for due process. Then the Trump Gestapo, the ICE officers, they wait in the bushes or they wait outside. This was from June 5th, 2025, where Brad Lander explained, I'm going to show you this clip where he was beginning to do these observations. As you heard there, Brad Lander was saying, "I'm not obstructing at all."
Spoiler, they were very, very wrong. For those who might not know, Brad Lander isn't exactly someone you'd picture as a threat to society. His job is balancing NYC's checkbook and making sure taxpayer money isn't going toward things like $200 office staplers or mystery expenses that fund, say, private jet rides to Mar-a-Lago. But more than that, Lander is a vocal advocate for immigrant rights. He's been heavily involved in New York City's Friends of the Court program, which provides support and resources for immigrants navigating the legal system. Sounds pretty wholesome, right? Like bake sale level, PTA meeting wholesome, except in Trump's America, it seems helping immigrants makes you a prime candidate for a confrontational run-in with federal goons. On this particular day, Lander wasn't doing anything unusual. He was at the courthouse extending support to those who might need it, quietly observing and ensuring immigrants weren't being coerced, confused, or mistreated. And then, like a scene out of a low-budget action movie, picture shaky camera work and dialogue written by someone who learned English from watching early Schwarzenegger films, ICE agents appeared. To Lander's credit, he didn't flinch. Instead, he asked the agents a very reasonable question. Can I see a judicial warrant? A fair request, considering the agents were about to escalate from courtroom cameos to full-blown arrest mode. But here's where it gets funny. The agents didn't seem to have one. They acted like he'd just asked to see their long division homework from middle school. Now, it's worth noting that in situations like this, ICE is supposed to have a judicial warrant to detain someone in court because, laws and all that, but Lander asking for basic accountability. That apparently threw them completely off script. They fumbled and stammered like they were rehearsing the worst improv scene in history. Imagine asking someone at a drive-thru for extra pickles, and they respond by hitting the gas instead of handing you your food. That's the level of unprepared panic we're talking about here. What happened next was, well, equal parts absurd and terrifying. The ICE agents didn't just flounder in the warrant department, they escalated. Cameras from multiple angles caught the bizarre chaos as they surrounded Lander, loudly demanding that others—
I just left immigration court proceedings at 290 Broadway, where families were coming in for hearings, and ICE is making them subject to what's called expedited removal. These are families who have been here for more than a year, who have applied for asylum, and they have a right to have their case heard. But what Donald Trump and ICE are doing now is stripping that right away from them. It's terrifying for the city of New York. It's terrifying for the rule of law. So I thought it was important to show up and see for myself.
Back off, while they made a scene that looked more like a blooper reel for an authoritarian sitcom than actual law enforcement. Lander, standing calm and unshaken, repeatedly questioned their authority, but his rationality only seemed to rile them up more. They weren't just flustered, they were outmatched in the debate, and honestly, it was like watching a high school principal argue with students over dress code violations. Except unlike most students, Lander had receipts, and by receipts, I mean actual knowledge of the law. There's footage of him standing firm, calmly asking, "Where's the judicial warrant?" while the agents threw every excuse in the book his way. At one point, the scene became so ridiculous, it was less law enforcement and more sketch comedy gone wrong. The agents flailed further as they claimed, get this, that they felt threatened by Lander's actions. Threatened by a city comptroller casually standing there in a suit, basically doing his job. It's like being afraid of a librarian because they reminded you to be quiet. The claim sounds almost laughable until you realize the power dynamics at play. This wasn't a mistake, it was intentional. Trump's administration has a history of using ICE not so much to enforce immigration law, but to silence dissent and intimidate anyone who dares to question their authority. And make no mistake, Lander getting treated like enemy number one wasn't just about him, it was a chilling message. If they could corner a city leader who was standing up for immigrants, what does that mean for everyday people who don't have a title, resources, or cameras there to catch the madness? Oh, but it gets even better. After arresting him, ICE made the absurd claim that Lander was somehow interfering with their operations. Interfering. By doing what? Standing quietly near immigrants and offering them guidance. That's like arresting someone for holding an umbrella during a rainstorm. They're helping, not hurting. The absurdity of it all left bystanders scratching their heads and viewers of the footage wondering if this whole thing was secretly a social experiment just to see how far ICE could go without anyone calling them out. Lander's calm defiance has since turned him into something of a resistance hero, a symbol of standing up to bullies with badges. But the encounter raised bigger questions. If being a friend to immigrants can get you arrested, what happens if you start asking harder questions or digging deeper into the system? For ICE, it seems the answer is simple. Arrest first, figure it out later. What happens when a group of ICE agents tries to show off their authority but ends up looking clueless instead? Enter Brad Lander's arrest, a masterclass in overreach that was somehow both awkward and unsettling. The moment was caught from multiple angles, unintentionally turning into a chaotic short film of errors that did nothing to make ICE look like the pros they probably imagined themselves to be. Let's break this down. It all started with a pretty straightforward setting. Brad Lander standing calmly in the hallway of 26 Federal Plaza as he supported immigrants going through the nightmare that is our immigration courts. But ICE agents weren't here for wholesome justice or due process. They were here to disrupt, and disrupt they did, right after shouting orders at anyone nearby like they were auditioning for a Judge Dredd reboot. Lander, who was peacefully escorting a defendant out of court, became their next target. That's when the real show began. While Lander, the quintessential mild-mannered city official, stood his ground and politely requested to see a judicial warrant, the agents responded by escalating things faster than a reality show argument over who didn't load the dishwasher. Just picture it. ICE agents yelling at bystanders to back up, fumbling their way through Lander, asking them simple, lawful questions. "Can I see a judicial warrant?" he asked, his voice level and matter-of-fact. Instead of presenting one, or even pretending to have one, they seemed completely thrown off. Their response had all the energy of a kid caught sneaking cookies, but still trying to deny it while crumbs clinged to their face. Lander even pointed out, "I'm not obstructing, I'm standing right here in the hallway," but logic clearly wasn't on the agenda. The whole thing played out like a scene from an unrehearsed high school play where the actors forgot their lines and decided shouting was the next best option. They weren't arresting a combative protester or someone actually obstructing justice. They were arresting the guy simply asking, "Are you following the rules?" By the end, the agents' heavy-handed approach backfired spectacularly. Lander's detainment turned into a viral moment, a symbol of Trump's ICE overreach that set the internet ablaze with equal parts condemnation and disbelief. Far from discouraging him, the arrest gave Lander more exposure, a bigger platform, and a rising level of support from all corners. But is this just an isolated incident? Was the Lander debacle a one-time oops moment for ICE? Sadly, no. This wasn't a slip-up. It was part of a broader pattern of intimidation tactics aimed at anyone willing to challenge the system. And trust me, the next example gets even wilder. Why? Because if ICE agents botching a simple arrest is bad, just wait until we talk about what happened to a US senator. Spoiler, it's exactly as messy as it sounds. If you thought arresting a comptroller for asking questions was wild, wait until you hear about Senator Alex Padilla's experience. Yes, a sitting US senator wasn't just yelled at for stepping out of line. He was physically removed from a room and thrown to the ground by the same agents who claim they're here to protect America. Apparently, asking questions about ICE's actions is the new equivalent of a federal crime. Here's what happened. Senator Padilla, representing California, was at a press event when he tried to ask the Secretary of Homeland Security a simple question. He wasn't yelling, causing a scene, or doing anything remotely disruptive. He was just, brace yourself, trying to hold leadership accountable. Shocking, right? Before he could even get the words out, ICE agents swooped in like bouncers at a club who have no idea what VIP means. They pushed and pulled him, eventually forcing him to the ground. Remember, this was all happening to a US senator duly elected to represent his constituents. It's almost as if asking questions about accountability is the new "you don't belong here" card, even when you're one of the people directly involved in shaping the laws. Padilla, understandably shaken, later made a powerful point about the incident. If what you saw happens to me on camera, imagine what happens when there aren't cameras. That one statement cut through all the noise. It shines a glaring light on what kind of unchecked power ICE seems to think they have when the spotlight isn't on them. Padilla wasn't just talking about his own experience. He was speaking for the countless individuals who have been mistreated by a system built on intimidation but silenced by the lack of witnesses. The thought hits hard. If they're willing to target someone like Padilla in full view of cameras, what are they capable of when no one's watching? This wasn't some isolated oops moment either. Padilla's rough handling closely mirrors what happened to Lander in the New York courthouse. There's a clear pattern here. Target the elected officials who challenge Trump's policies and make them pay for it. It's like dealing with a school bully who gets offended when someone asks why their lunch money demands don't come with a receipt. Except in this case, the bully has badges and federal authority to throw people to the ground for daring to speak up. You've got to admire the consistency, even if it is terrifying. Padilla also called out the incident for what it really was, intimidation. He didn't mince his words, highlighting that this type of behavior wasn't about enforcing the law, it was about sending a very public message. And honestly, the whole thing sounds like a scene directed by Trump himself. You can almost picture him on the sidelines saying, "Make it look like a crackdown." Okay, but also, make sure you drag someone. Great TV ratings. The fact that we can so easily imagine Trump playing the role of a bad reality show host giving orders to ICE agents tells you everything you need to know about how calculated these incidents are. It's not enforcement, it's theater. But here's where things get really unsettling. If they're willing to manhandle elected officials for holding them accountable, what does that mean for ordinary people? The ones without a title or a platform, or let's face it, a senator's level of security detail. It raises the stakes for those on the receiving end of these so-called enforcement actions. When ICE agents start acting like they need a therapy dog just to hear someone ask, "Can you explain why you're doing this?" You've got to wonder if they're even equipped to do their jobs at all. If they can't handle basic questions without resorting to force, what exactly is the plan? Or is the chaos the plan? The public outrage over incidents like these has been overwhelming, and with good reason. People have pointed out that this type of behavior has shades of authoritarian regimes written all over it. Comments flooded in, likening ICE's actions to government overreach we'd expect to read about in dystopian novels. One particularly scathing comparison called Trump's ICE agents wannabe stormtroopers who can't even find their helmets. Harsh, but fair. Because if their behavior is supposed to reflect order and discipline, they might want to rethink their strategy. So far, all it seems to reflect is an agency that thrives on fear and confusion, and not much else. The bigger picture here is hard to ignore. This isn't about keeping the country safe. It's about silencing anyone who poses even the smallest challenge to Trump's worldview. Padilla wasn't a threat. Lander wasn't a threat. Neither of them was standing in the way of actual law enforcement. What they were doing, however, was bothering to to ask whether the people in charge were following their own rule. And according to Trump's ICE, that's apparently enough reason to target you. Comptroller, senator, doesn't matter. If you stand up, you're fair game. Grandma might be next for all we know. She asked too many questions during bingo night. Boom, she's a threat too. And speaking of what's next, that's the question we should all be asking right now, because this isn't stopping here. If ICE is willing to escalate at this level, where does it end? What's next on Trump's chaos agenda? Arresting people for jaywalking? Throwing someone in cuffs for chewing gum too loudly? The possibilities feel endless, and not in a good way. When ICE agents are arresting city leaders and roughing up senators, it's pretty clear this isn't about justice. It's about creating fear. The numbers don't lie. Most immigrants in ICE custody have no criminal record, so all that talk about dangerous criminals is just smoke and mirrors. Even Ben Meiselas nailed it, calling this Trump's campaign to unleash hell inside federal courthouses. It's intimidation, plain and simple. So stay informed, support independent news, and pay attention. And let's be honest, nothing screams "Make America Great Again" quite like arresting a guy for supporting immigrants in court. Classic, right?